We're going to get started. I would just like to say hi. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're honored to continuously host this wonderful event for you guys and are even more honored that you guys come year after year to support us. Before we get started, I'd like to open up this event with a quote. The quote is from Malala Yousafzai, and she said, "We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back." And that's exactly what, even in 2017, we're still trying to fight. A lot of women are still facing adversity and trying to move forward despite of the fact that, nothing else than the fact that they are women. So today we will hear about the fight of many women from many different backgrounds, many different cultures, and we will hear about how far they've come to be where they are today. Before I get started with introductions, I'd like to thank Mayor Gary Christensen and State Representative Stephen Altrino I'd like to thank them for their continuous support. They've never missed an event to come out and show how much they've rooted for us, and we thoroughly appreciate them. So before we really get the ball rolling, I'd like to introduce the president of AAAW. The majority of you know her, and if you do not know her, then trust me, you are most definitely missing out. Please introduce yourself sometime today. AAAW was an organization that was founded for women by an absolutely amazing woman who works tirelessly in her professional career as a mother, a daughter, a wife, and a sister. Yet she still somehow finds time for her community, and her community not being people who mirror her ethnicity or religion or gender. Her community is everyone. She works day in and day out to bring all of us together. So endless projects that you guys may have heard about, kick-started by other people or by other organizations, have actually been sparked by her in her little living room. So she absolutely 100% does not get the credit or recognition that she deserves. So with all your help, let's give a round of applause for Saada Aqib.
Rita surprises me. I didn't know she's gonna say all that. But really, I won't take the credit by myself. It's all of us. It's Habiba, it's Absamad, Morad, and a lot more than that. And Nisha, and so many women and men, both. Both, they do help us and support what we do. So today, it's the International Women's Day. So hi everyone, and thank you for coming to our annual International Women's Day celebration. Before we start, we're gonna thank you again, Mr. Mayor. We're gonna keep thanking you.
Thank you.
So before we start, I want to extend my gratitude to the City of Malden. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without the continued support of Mayor Christensen and his office. Malden, the Malden Public Library, the Malden Cultural Council, and all the communities surrounding us. This year, International Women's Day campaign theme is Be Bold for a Change. That's what we need to do. We need to be bold for a change. But that's not something new for women, right? There is a famous story called Alf Lila و Lila, or 1001 Nights. In the story, King Shahrayar fears and hates women after he discovers that his wife and his brother's wife have been unfaithful. He decides to marry a woman every night and kill her in the morning. He goes on tormenting the women in his kingdom until the brave Shahrazad steps up. On that first night, She tells him a story so fascinating that the king can't bear to kill her in the morning. Not without hearing the end of the story. The second night, the same night happens, and then the third night, and then the next 998 nights after that. So no more women die at Shahrayar's hands, and Shahrazad saved the kingdom. And that's the thing, isn't it? Women are already bold for change. Women have been bold for a change, at least since Shahrazad put on her prettiest dress and risked her life telling stories so she could maybe save every other woman in her kingdom. Being bold for change isn't a new concept for most of us, just like it wasn't new for Shahrazad. Because while we were from every corner of the world, everyone on our roster today is united by one thing. We all have resistance in our blood. From Intifada to independence movements, from Gandhi to Toussaint Louverture, we have been colonized and we have rebuilt and we have lived the tale to tell. And you have to be bold to be able to do that. Women are at the core of these resistance movements. In Liberia, women forced their husbands to stop the civil war, Les Estrada style. Frida Kahlo, a Mexican painter, created art and advocated for the poor and the marginalized. Even now, in the United States, Winona LaDuke fights for the protection of the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in North Dakota. America isn't a perfect country. It was built on a stolen land by stolen people. There is racism, rampant poverty, wealth inequality, mass incarceration, mass deportation. But the one thing that has always been great about it is this room filled with these people from these places coming together to share our cultures for no reason other than that we want to. America is racism and poverty, but it is this too, diversity, cultural exchange, all of us sitting in a room together to play music, dance, show off unique style, and of course, eat. I leave you all with this: be bold for change, like the women that came before you, because wherever you are from, I assure you, there are women in your history, and probably women in your bloodline who were bold for a change. Without them, we wouldn't have the right to vote, we wouldn't have independence, we wouldn't have basic civil liberties. That's not to say every problem has been solved. We still have the gender gap. The fact that white women earn 77 cents for each dollar that men earn. Black women earn 60 cents for every dollar that a man earns. And Latina women earn 54 cents 54 cents every dollar a man earns. We still have to fight for reproductive rights globally. We have issues of race, ethnicity, and religion that affect us regardless of our gender. So be bold for a change, because even though we have come so far, there is still so far to go. Be bold for a change, because that's the only way change happens. Be bold for a change, because bold is the only way you know how to be. And thank you so much.
Thank you. That was great. Can we get another round of applause for her? So up next, I'm going to introduce Claudia Foxtree. Claudia is an Arawak and a member of the United Confederation of the Taino People. She is also on the board of the Massachusetts Center of Native Americans. Claudia has been a K-12 school teacher for over 30 years, and she has also taught multicultural and diversity courses at the college level to educators for far more than 25 years. Claudia is also on the board of the Massachusetts Liaison of the United Confederation of the Taino People, and she is also multicultural and bilingual. Her father is Native American and her mother is German. In 2011, Claudia published a chapter, Aren't They All Dead? Covert Racism and Native Americans in Covert Racism, Theories, Institution, and Experiences, edited by Dr. Rodney D. Coates and published by Brill in the Netherlands. On January 21, 2017, Claudia was actually the first speaker in the Boston Women's March and spoke to over 125,000 people on the Boston Commons. So please give a hand to Claudia Fox-Drake.
Thank you. I wanted to introduce my daughter, Savannah. She was also with me at the Common. And she's on break from Roger Williams, so I just picked her up and brought her here. Said, guess what? Thank you so much to the American Association for Arab Women for thinking of me and thinking of Indigenous people and inviting us, meaning me, to this event. And thank you for Malden Public Library for hosting. I'm so glad we have public libraries still, and I hope that happens for a long time. And for all of you for coming out on this kind of chilly day to honor the women in your life or learn about women's history and stories. Savannah's going to be, not yet, but she's going to be my page turner, and then maybe we'll have time for treat at the end. I wanted to, you can flip the page. I wanted to start by situating who I am. I am among the 78% of Indigenous people who live off of the reservation. I don't personally worry about a non-native man coming on the reservation and raping me because they won't be prosecuted. And I don't live in a community filled with alcoholism and drugs and other symptoms of poverty. So I have a lot of advantages relative to the people who do live on reservations. I want to acknowledge a few statistics, mostly from the 2010 census. I woke up this morning in a home that I own. Only 54% of Native Americans own their home compared to 65% of the general population. I ate breakfast, got dressed, and drove a decent car to get here. 28% of Native Americans live in poverty compared to the 15% the nation as a whole. 4 years ago, I didn't have any of those things because my home burned down due to an electrical fire. But I have insurance and friendship and community, and I mention this because I know some of the struggles of my people personally, but that's not where I've lived most of my life. And we all can only do what's within our own sphere of influence. That's what we can talk about, that's what we can speak to. It's whatever we have inside that we're able to put forward. Next slide. I'm among the 67% of mixed blood multiracial Native Americans who finished high school compared to the national average of 80%. These numbers are lower for people that identify as full-blooded Indigenous people. I'm among the 30% who completed an undergraduate degree at a college or university. I have a graduate degree, again, multiracial people as opposed to people who identify as only one nation. And in 2010, only 67,644 people who were Native American received graduate degrees. That's half the people who were at the Boston Common, half the Native American people. Only 15 states have 100,000 American Indians or more than that. And these facts put me again in a position of relative privilege. I can talk about other kinds of issues than some of the people, for example, who are Standing Rock are fighting for, but I'm here and I'm able to talk about their issues. So we have to do what we can in the positions that we are. Next slide. So for 500 years, our story have been told by other people. This is one of the biggest issues for us in this country. We can't tell our own narrative, our own stories. We have no other country that we should or are in that we should be able to tell our story. This is our land, this is our country. But our stories have been taken away from us and reimagined and retold by people who are not Indigenous people. The Hollywood films, the literature, the textbooks, the holidays, the calendar, which we use all year long, don't represent our holidays, our observations, our important events. The statues and plaques all around this state and the country represent stories of our conquest, of our colonization, of our subordination, and our story is told through stereotypes. We've been murdered, put in concentration camps, enslaved, stolen from our families, and put into boarding schools. This slide shows an example of the supposed taking the Indian out of the man, turning somebody from the indigenous person into the American person. Next slide. People make money off of our images, which take our sacred things out of the context of where they are found. Headdresses have meanings in other nations. They aren't one for my nation particularly, but other nations, you have to earn every single feather that is in a headdress. So to take it out of context is a huge offense to those nations. Next slide. Basically, what's being said is it's okay to dress up as a Native American, but it's not okay to be one. Next slide. These are actual photographs from my friends took at Standing Rock this past summer. Over time, we've been told, give up your water or go to jail. Give us this land or go to jail. We're waiting to hear, give up breathing, give up the air, or go to jail. We've said, yes, you can share this land, and people have said, oh, we can have it. We've said, yes, you can have this water and share it with us, and we've been told, well, we're going to set up a company and it's going to end up polluting the water, but don't worry about it, we'll clean it for you, which never happens. We think of water, land, and air in the same kind of way. Of course, Mother Nature, Mother Earth put it here for us all to use, not for you to own or to have. We are going to share it, just like we would share air. Next slide. I want to point out a couple of Indigenous women. In the back, I've set up an entire display about Indigenous women, past and present. They're on cards that look like this, and I encourage you to pick up a card and look inside and read a little bit about the person. And you can also pick up a sheet that has just the people and their pictures to take home so that you know what they've done. I picked the Sachin Littlefeather one to kind of show you because not since 1973 was the last time somebody accepted an Academy Award for someone else. She accepted it for Marlon Brando until this year when someone accepted it for someone else. After she did this, it was outlawed at the Academy Awards until this year. So this brings me to how we've kept our culture alive. It's by mothers raising their sons and their daughters. Childless aunties and some men also have helped. But we wouldn't be the survivors that we are today if we didn't have the women in our nations continuing the traditions and the culture from one time to the next time to the next time through the generations. We've had to have the strength, the endurance, and the dignity to face every day with resilience to 500 years of oppression. We're small, but we're dedicated, and we're warriors. We're activists, musicians, athletes, actors, teachers, politicians, and more. In Indian country today, a Cherokee elder, Joe Forkiller, he laid out 10 things that Indigenous people should do, and I'm going to adjust that slightly to what Indigenous women do for cultural survival. This is the saving the kingdom that we heard Scheherazade doing. This is what we do, what we can do to save our personal kingdom, which is our Indigenous culture. And even after the boarding schools, we're still here fighting to keep it. Next slide. The first thing is share your culture. I would add teach your culture. When I had 5 children, everything we did came with a lesson, often about animals and plants. How do you respond? How do you respect the grass that you're about to mow over with a lawnmower? How do you respect a flute the first time that you get it? How do you honor the music that it's going to play for you? How do you send a pet spirit into the Creator? What's a powwow, and what does it mean, and what are the rules, and how do you respect your elders and your country and the men and women who are at the powwow? Next slide. Take part in ceremony. As I taught my children about drumming, I invited their friends' parents, and my friends to learn. I had a monthly drumming circle that has become an anchor. The work I do isn't just about helping my kids remember their culture, it's also to help others understand our current culture, how we're living it, the impact of history and oppression on us. And it's about bringing along my allies, activists, agitators, and accomplices to continue to spread the word. Next slide. Next thing he says is to start a Native group or club. I grew up with only one powwow a year in Massachusetts. Now there are about 2 or 3 every weekend. It's a very different world that I'm growing up in than my children did. I had to reach out to find my community in an age before internet and even before books about my nation were written. I learned the creation stories, the songs, the spiritual practices, and other aspects of culture, not through school or church or temple, but by connecting with people when they were in town or I'd go out to find them. Here's some of my community, and I put in one of my guy friends because some people think that us Native people are all stoic, and they were kind of goofing off there. So I wanted to break that stereotype a bit. Next slide. So the next thing he suggests is speaking with tribal officials. Just living a Native life is political, as we've already heard today. Being a woman can be political too, just living. I'm also on the board of the Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness and the United Confederation of Taino People. If you're in Massachusetts, join the Mass Center. It can be as low as $25, and every little bit together helps us put on our programs. These 2 organizations have guided me, provided support network to local and national politics, and helped me have a place where I can practice my culture. This is my church or my temple or my school, or at least a piece of it. Next slide. Another thing he suggests is visiting an elder. Yep, that's the right one. I wouldn't know what I know if I didn't do that as part of my growing up. It turns out a lot of the elders nowadays are men that I'm interacting with. Historically, though, we've been matrilineal and matriarchal societies, so we've had our lineage through the women in the society and our leadership, and in some places that's still the case, but we've also adopted many of the traditions of the colonizers, so more men are in power than there would have been traditionally. In this particular slide, I have some of the people who have been the elders and mentors in my life. The bottom corner here is my father, Fox Tree, and next to him is Robert Mokero. He's the president of the United Confederation of Taino People. And up at the top is Slow Turtle, who was the supreme medicine man of the Wampanoag and passed on about 20 years ago. And over here, I have Lee and Harry Edmonds, who are elders who are in my life currently at every event that I go to practically. Next slide. Another thing he says is to meet with tribal historians, and this is ongoing for me. And so beyond meeting with people, there are finally books out that I can refer to. When I was growing up, I didn't see the word Arawak in print once in my K through 12 career. It wasn't until my second year of college that I started to see some literature with that word. How many people, raise your hand, have ever heard Arawak before? Okay. If you look around, that's just a few hands. How many people have heard of Christopher Columbus? Okay, so that shows one of the problems with history. Christopher Columbus met a bunch of people. Taino is just one of the group. Indian is way too vague, and the Arawak is the language group and the dominant group that was in the Caribbean when Columbus landed. So I put up here some of the books that have been important. Bartolome de las Casas was on the Columbus voyages, so he has a first-hand account. And then there's some other books about history and stereotypes and contributions. Next slide. He mentions joining a social media group. Native Americans have totally used the internet and social media to stay connected. We have to. We've been sent thousands of miles away from our original land, our original nations. Our people have been split up. We've lost pieces of our culture. It's like a puzzle, and we find each other and we make a connection about how somebody might know the song you sing when you gather clay, someone else might know where to gather clay, someone else might know how to make the pots or what designs to put on it. So it's been an important network and connection. But I want to point out that I like to hang out at powwow and have that community just come to me. So this is me at my booth. Next slide. Learn about shared history. For me, growing up in New England has meant learning about Wampanoags. Both our nations were massacred and enslaved, and we're both people of the first light because we're on the East Coast. It's helped me feel connected to this area when my nation is so far away, although there are large populations in Connecticut and New York. Next slide. So he suggests make a YouTube video, which apparently is out there from the March in January, so I can check that off on his list. I'm going to say make yourself as political as you can, as you feel safe to, as you're able to. Here are a couple of protests. Idle No More, which was is ongoing and it particularly related and started in Canada. The Standing Rock, this is on the State House steps, and of course the Women's March. Next slide. And then he says, learn your language. And so a lot of the language that I've learned, I know a few words here or there. Ich habe eine deutsche Mutter, so that's really my first language is my mother's language. My father's the one who's native. But I have learned some words, and I've learned some songs. So I'm going to share a song, and then Savannah's going to share a song. The song that I'm going to share is one about the Mother Earth, and it's offering really big thank yous for the earth. That's what Bomato means. And we're going to do it together. It's call and answer. So let's just practice it first. And then I'm going to come over here and do it with the drum. So you say what I say. Dakana boria atabera, Dakana boria atabera, Dakana boria atabera, Dakana boria atabera. And the rest is pretty much what you see, but let's try it. Bomato matabe, bomato. Bomato matabe, bomato. Oh, this is going to sound really good. So, repeat after me. Aho is one of the ways that Native nations say, I have spoken, did you like what I hear? So the response is often, I heard you, I like what I heard, aho back. So I say aho, and you say? Aho. Excellent. Now Savannah is going to sing Amazing Grace in Cherokee. This was a song that some people don't know the history of Amazing Grace. It has a long history. It goes back to a man who had a slave ship. He was on a slaver, and he probably heard music of the African people that he had enslaved. He probably heard them singing, and he had a change of heart and decided he was going to not enslave African people anymore. That's when he made this song, and then later on he became a minister. So the song isn't just a religious song. Most people think of it like that. It's a song that came out of a revelation that I shouldn't really be doing this horrible thing. The Cherokee, when they were relocated, took on this song and were singing it also for themselves when they were going back to their hills. So she's going to sing the first verse, and then everybody's invited to sing in the second verse the first verse again, the second time through, in English.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Aho.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It's always nice to hear about history and what actually happened from those that were part of it. Before I present the next person, I would just like to extend our gratitude to school committee member Emmanuel Marshall for coming out and supporting us. Thank you so much. Up next, I would just like to introduce Gloria Salzar from the Malton Latino Council.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for including us. I want to begin extending that emotion about Suara Cave. I really appreciate and honor everything that she has done for the city, and we are thrilled to be part of this program. What we are contributing to the program today is 3 parts. We are going to begin with 2 Malden High School students who are members of the Multicultural Club. I recently met them, and I am absolutely fascinated by these 2 beautiful Latinas. They are Tatiana Redondo, a senior at Malden High. She is an American citizen born to Colombian parents. She is going to join the Army at the end of this year because she wants to study criminal justice. And we are proud to have with us a kid who is going to be part of the first generation in her family to go to college. Tatiana, we're proud of you. With her, part of the work that they're presenting, Andrea and Tatiana have done a lot of research, and they are going to present a PowerPoint about the history of women's rights in Latin America, the role of religion in politics in oppressing women. Andrea is a junior at Malden High. She was born in El Salvador, and you would never believe it, she only came a year and a half ago to this country. She has not yet made up her mind. She's a kid. She hasn't made up her mind about what she wants to study after high school. But for now, she is a very powerful advocate for undocumented immigrants. The second part of our program is going to be a really short performance by Bajo Col. Bajo Col is the Colombian youth ballet. We are honored to have with us tonight Miguel Vargas, a person who has done a lot for immigrants and who teaches about 150 people as a way of continuing the traditions of Colombia. So we are going to have a sample of one of the dances that Bajo Col performs. And then towards the end of the evening, when we go to eat, we are going to have Fabian Gallon. Fabian is going to be playing an instrument that looks like a guitar, but it's actually a tiple. A tiple is a traditional Colombian instrument, and it's the national the national instrument by a decree in Colombia. He is an immigrant. He has lived in the United States for 15 years. And because he has lived the life of the immigrant, he put aside his art. He was not able to do his, follow his passion because he was too busy supporting and raising a family. We are honored that he has come back to the art to concentrate on this amazing talent, and he'll be performing for us later today. So I'm going to invite on stage Tatiana and Andrea from Moulding High School.
So I'd like to say first, thank you to Gloria for thinking of me and Andrea with doing this presentation. Okay, so first we're going to start off with the definition of a strong woman. A strong woman, strong means she protects her joy and peace. She covers her family and friends, and she stands up for what is right, even if she has to stand all by herself. A strong woman who doesn't pretend to be strong, but actually is strong, and lives a life of balance. So, religion's role in Latin women's life. The women's movement had a hard time evolving in Latin American countries because of the culture's deep religious and how women were expected to be submitted to men and obey their demands. As early as 1890s, women had began to challenge dominant gender norms and began to express through many forms of art such as poems and novels. They mainly focused on suffrage, protective labor laws, and access to education. At the end of 1960, many Latin American females started forming groups of reflection and activism for defending women's rights, which focused on social justice rather than women's suffrage. Latin stepping up. The Pan-American feminist movement began in 1945, and Latin American women had a huge part in how the women of Latin America came to the U.S. and how multilateralism, peace, and social democracy came to the U.S. And then we decided to pick women of the present and the past who have had a huge impact on Latin women and how they overcame the movement. So first we have Frida Kahlo. She is a famous Mexican woman artist on the contemporary art scene. Her artwork considered of many issues that society seemed to ignore, such as disability, sexuality, miscarriage, birth, breastfeeding, and other things that were seen as taboo. And she is currently on the Mexican bill. Then we have Prudencia Ayala. She was a Salvadorian writer and social activist who fought for women's rights in El Salvador. In 1930, she intended to run as a candidate for presidency of the Republic, even though the Salvadorian legislation did not consider women's right to vote at the time. Her application was rejected by the Supreme Court, but the debate had followed, stirred up many feminist movements, and in 1939, they were reconsidered, and in 1950, women got legal recognition in El Salvador. Then we have Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. She's a Mexican writer and a contributor to the Spanish Golden Age. Through her literary work, Sor Juana was a famous figure in the 17th century and is honored in Mexico as being part of a political controversy in the late 20th century. She wrote moral, satiric, and religious lyrics along with many poems. And she is the first published feminist of the New World and is the most outstanding writer of the Spanish American, and she is currently on the Mexican bill. Then we have Julia de Burgas. She was an advocate of Puerto Rican independence. She served as Secretary General of the Daughter of Freedom, the women's branch of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, and was also a civil rights activist for women and Afro-Caribbean writers. A reoccurring theme in her poems are about social justice and women's rights. And later on, she worked in New York City, where she worked as a journalist for Pueblos Hispanos, which was a really popular newspaper. And then we have Alicia Dickerson Montemayor. and she was an American civil activist and was the first woman elected to a national office not specifically designed for women, having served as vice president generally of the interest group, the League of United Latin American Citizens. Montemayor wrote many articles for the League of the U.S. Latin American Citizens, more than any other woman in history. In 1934, Montemayor became a social worker for Webb County, where she investigated cases to place Mexican Americans on welfare during the Great Depression.
Hi everybody, my name is Andrea Martinez Marino, and I'm gonna continue on with the ones who continued the legacy. The first woman we have is Cristina de Kirchner. She is an Argentine lawyer and politician who served as the second female president in Argentina, the first woman who was elected by public votes, and she has paved the way for many more women in the world of politics in Argentina. Then we have Rigoberta Menchú, as previously presented as well. She is a Guatemalan political activist who dedicates her life to publicizing the rights of Guatemalan indigenous tribes. She received the Nobel Prize in 1992 and the Prince of Asturias Prize in 1998. She is an UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, as well as becoming a figure in not only political parties, but also ran for president in both 2007 and 2011. Then we have Lili Escalcén Garcia, who her father and mother are from Panama. She became the first Hispanic to be chosen as the Democratic Party's nominee for a U.S. congressional seat in Utah, but did not win with 45% of the votes. And in 2000, she served as a member of President Bill Clinton's White House strategy session on improving Hispanic education, as well as in 2011 when President Obama named her a member of the President's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for Hispanics, where she now leads the largest professional employee organization in the United States. We also have Dolores Huerta, who was an American labor leader and civil rights activist, who was the co-founder of National Farm Workers Association during the 1960s. She has advocated for workers, immigrants, and women's rights. She has received several awards, including the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Human Rights and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Someone who is more well known is Shakira, who besides being a singer, a songwriter, a dancer, and a producer with many prizes under her belt, she has been known for her philanthropic activities through charitable works like her foundation Pies Descalzos, who is based on the name of one of her albums, which is focused on schooling for poor children all over Colombia, as well as being a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. And we also have Carolina Herrera, who is a Venezuelan praised and acclaimed fashion icon who has not only had her strong share of success by dressing important women like Jackie Onassis Kennedy and Michelle Obama, but has also involved in organizations like Iniciativa SER, an organization dedicated for the prevention and treatment of breast cancer in Venezuela and many other countries like Panama, and Aid for AIDS, a Venezuelan also organization that provides children who live under HIV. The Latina feminists in the U.S. have, we can say, a slightly easier role because in the U.S. it is more known that people have a more open mind and they're more willing for change rather than in Latin America, where it's more about tradition, religion, and cultural norms. And as for the Latina feminists in Latin America, they have been able to overcome many odds in order to become a large movement that now has a strong presence all over Latin America. They have overcome the roles they had been intended to, and yet they are still important. Yet there are still women who have families. There are women who have husbands. There are women who have friends. And as for some interesting facts, Ecuador was the first country in all Latin America who gave women the right for vote, and and after that, all the countries followed easily. As well as in history, there have been 9 women in office all over Latin America, for something that we think is really impressive, given the fact that many people think that Latin America is full of third world countries who are so full of religion that will not allow a woman to be in power. Yet we still have more women presidents, even compared to the United States. The first female president was Isabel Perón in Argentina, who was elected president after her husband died in office. She was not only the first president who served the way, but also created a great legacy and was one of many important foundations and many important organizations that paved the way for women. As well as in the 2014 census, it came to the conclusion that 612 million people lived in Latin America, 310 million of them being women, and only 302 million of them being men. And it is still a little bit surprising because even all the progress we've made, it is still hard to be a Latina woman in a country where you are expected to grow up only to become a mother and to stay at home. So in conclusion, we just want to say that Latin American women, we are strong and we are proud of who we are, and we are proud of what we've achieved, even in a country and all the countries that have always been against us. So thank you so much for your attention. We also want to point out that we, as part of the Multicultural Club in Malden High School, we have left some cards in the back because we will have an event on May 19th, which all of you are invited. It will be the Multicultural Night, where we are proud to have many cultures come together in one place. So if you would like to form part of it, you are welcome to be, and we have the information on the back. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, girls. It's so nice to see the talent and upcoming students that Malden High School harbor. So thank you so much, ladies. Before we move on to our next entertainment session, I'd like to thank school committee member Kathy Bordernano, for attending and supporting us. And I'd also like to thank Imam Habib Burut and his wife, Graziella Gozzi, for coming out. They come to every single one of our events and support us. So thank you so much, guys. So up next, the Malden Latino Council is going to entertain us with a quick Latin dance. Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely beautiful. So up next, I'd like to introduce Miriam Dehbi. So Miriam Dehbi is a first-year PhD student in education at Harvard University with a concentration in human development, learning, and teaching. Miriam immersed herself in the foundations of language and literacy development and built strong skills in educational research. She then joined the cabinet of the Moroccan Minister of National Education and Vocational Training. Miriam is interested in improving quality of education in settings as culturally rich and linguistically diverse as the Moroccan one. Her areas of interest thus involve multilingual education, language, literacy development, and instruction and educational technology. So please put your hands together for Miriam Dehbi.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you to the Association of Arab American Women for organizing this really important event. I really am proud of the association, and I'm really happy to be here. Today I'd like to tell you a little bit about my country, Morocco. It's a country that I deeply love, and I feel committed to it in my studies and my work. But also it's a country that I regard with a certain level of criticism. And sometimes, and more often, to be completely honest, I sometimes feel angry. I sometimes feel frustrated when I see the potential of my country, and I see that some things can be so much better than they are today. But the anger and the frustration that I frequently feel they don't prevent me from having hope, having interest in making a difference. And to be truthful, Moroccan society has come a long way in many ways. So there's an infinite number of ways in which we could tell you about Moroccan culture and Moroccan history of women's rights. We could go through the literature of the men and women who wrote about women's rights. We could go through the history of all movements. We could Google it. There are women like Fatima Mernissi, Aisha Belarbi, Nuzha Sqali, Aisha Shanna, who are really important women that should be mentioned. Also, our king has pushed for a lot of measures to improve the state of women's rights in Morocco. In 2011, during the Arab Spring, a new constitution was written, and in that constitution, there have been a few developments as far as the rights that were given to women. And Article 19 of the Constitution calls for the establishment of a high authority for gender parity and elimination of all forms of discrimination. Now, on paper, it's there, but there's a lot to be done to make that actually happen. The thing is that with most institutions in Morocco, they're not given the independence and the power that are necessary to bring everything that they're able to bring to the light of day. So that's sort of like the source of my frustration. And the status of the Moroccan woman, her freedom, her rights, they're still not exactly respected to the extent that they should. And that doesn't just hold for Morocco, it holds for so many other countries, right? But I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a public activist. I am not a public advocate for women's rights. I'm a student of education, and mostly I'm a woman myself. And I just have things to tell you about my history. I want to tell you about the history of Moroccan women through the story of my family. And I think that it's really important to talk about issues of public concern from very intimate spaces, because that's where everything happens, and that's where the real movements take place. So I will try to tell you about mostly two women in my family that sort of depict the context, the historical developments that Morocco has been through. But for those who don't know, Morocco, Al-Maghrib in Arabic, or where the sun sets, is located in the northwestern tip of Africa, a few miles south of Spain, where the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea meet. It's a place of rich history, although Honestly, every place in the world is a place of rich history. So I'm not going to give you the Moroccan exceptionalism thing here. But Morocco today has a population of over 33 million inhabitants. We speak a variety of languages, Arabic in various spoken forms. We speak Amazigh, which is the indigenous language that's been around. We're in the year 2967 in indigenous culture, Amazigh culture. But we also speak French and Spanish. This is our colonial heritage. And this is really, really important as far as our identity is concerned. Morocco is a Muslim constitutional monarchy. It's ruled by the Alawi dynasty since the 17th century. And about 100 years ago, Morocco fell under French colonization. They called it the French protectorate, to be politically correct. And also as well under Spanish control. And so that happened between 1912 and 1956. So not such a long time ago when you think about it. And the repercussions of that on today's state of things are huge. So until today, Morocco still has 2 Spanish cities in the Northern Territory, Ceuta and Melilla. And almost every Moroccan family has a story to tell related to the colonial times. And I do too. I was born to the children of independence. My father specifically was born in 1948 in Casablanca. You may have heard the movie Casablanca. It's changed a lot since then. But he was only 8 years old when Morocco gained its independence from the French. But just 1 year before that, he lost his own father, my grandfather, to the bullets of French police. The times were tense in the eve of the independence. My grandfather was actually a bus driver, lower class, in Casablanca, and he was quite the nationalist. He and his friends contributed to the making of independence at their own very small scale. So as a bus driver, he would use that position to sort of, whenever they got messages, secret messages, he'd carry them and pass them on to whoever was on the bus. So a lot of secret stuff happening there. One day, he took my 7-year-old father and his toddler brother out in the city, Casablanca. And as my grandpa and his friends were talking by a cafe, one of them saw the French patrol, in a car in the area, and a provocation sort of erupted. What happened between them is unclear, but what for sure is that the French policemen got out of their cars and started shooting around. So my father hid around the corner and he witnessed his father's death and then had to carry his toddler brother, who was wounded in his stomach by the same bullet actually that killed his father. But you might be wondering why I'm telling you this story. I mean, where are the women in this story, right? I'm telling you this story for 2 reasons. First, the Moroccan colonial history wounded and traumatized the men of this country, the men of Moroccan society. They fought but couldn't win over the colonizer for many, many years. And that sort of has had a result on the relationship between men and women in the colonial times, inside the household, behind the doors, right? So the nuclear Moroccan family had become sort of a refuge for men to heal the wounds of colonialism. And that's something that we very rarely talk about. It's really something that touches into the intimacy of the Moroccan family. So it was hard for them to even see women increasingly gain independence and be out there in the public scene. But then, what if a woman has to make it on her own? And that's the story it takes me to the second reason for why I'm starting off with the story of my grandfather's death. My grandmother just ended up being a widow. She was at home by herself. She would never leave home because my grandfather used to take care of everything. And all of a sudden, she's a widow with 3 kids, 3 boys that she has to take care of. Now that's something that's, we just talk about it now, but I can't even begin to imagine the stress that she must have been under at the time. And you know, at the time, late colonial times, only about 10% of the population lives in the city. The place of women in the public sphere is very limited, to say the least. And my grandmother, as it was of normal cultural practice at the time, did not leave the house. Her husband worked, and she took care of household matters. But suddenly she was a widow with 3 boys at charge and no income. And while the role and status of women in upper classes of the big city sort of evolved pretty fast, women, daughters of notables, were able to go to school, get an education. She was not one of them. So she had to sort of figure things out on her own. So my grandmother made sure her sons went to school, a nationalist school, and her main roles were those of making sure that her kids got an education and that her kids got a religious education as well. She left the house, and that's a big thing. It's a big deal. Like, we talk about it like we leave the house, it's normal, we go to the mall, but that was a big deal. She was entirely covered. Women were covered in so many different ways. She left the house, and she got matters under control. One day, my father, he was still a child, he went on a school trip to a different town that was many hours away, but he fell sick, and he couldn't participate in the trip's activities. Well, my grandmother, who had barely started leaving the house to bring food in, did the unthinkable at the time. She left the house. She also left the town. And she went and found her son and brought him home when she knew that the type of school trip that he was on wouldn't provide him with the care that he needed. Now, I wrote this and I was thinking, but this is so trivial. It's not. It's a big deal for a woman in the early 50s to be able to get out of a house, regardless of what people think, regardless of what people say, and go and get her son, a boy. Why would a boy need the help of anyone? He's a boy, right? We should leave him. She had so much care for her children that she was able to, to brave and to challenge the common cultural practices. She raised a man who has always felt responsible for his mother's well-being and for his country's development. My father later on pursued higher studies, became one of the youngest teachers of his generation, and paid for his younger brother's education as well. And today I'm here because a woman who lived in the most traditional conservative portions of society took on the courage to brave the norms as a single mother, to not only leave the house but also the city when necessary to allow for her children to get the best out of this life. Now, I can't talk about my father's story without talking about my mother's story. It's another story of loss and courage and self-sacrifice. My mother was born 10 years after my father in 1958 in Casablanca as well, to 2 Amazigh parents. Amazigh is the term for indigenous parents. Her grandfather and grand-uncle were among the last people to fight the French. My great-grand-uncle left a famous saying in Amazigh that says, "Itmal qartas, itma wawal." This meant, no more gunpowder, the conversation is over. They fought the French with equal weapons for a while, and they did really well. But when the French came with the airstrikes, that was it. And so they were one of the last people to resist French colonization. Anyway, my mother lost her mother when she was only 3. And my aunts and uncles who are a little bit older, I got to see her, say that I look like her. At the time, my mother's father, my grandfather, was a pretty successful businessman, but a busy one, obviously. He traveled a lot, but he had one goal in mind: his daughter's education. When my grandmother died, a couple of my grandfather's relatives offered to adopt her. Now, that sounds like a pretty nice offer for my grandfather, right? But when you think about it, it's also a life-changing one, and it can be potentially traumatic in many different ways. But it took another woman in the family, at the time she was in her late teens, early 20s, to change this, and to not allow for that adoption to take place, and to change my mother's life trajectory. This woman was my mom's older sister, a young woman whose entire life was about to change. In the face of losing her little sister, my mother, to some well-intentioned uncles and aunts, she made a decision that shaped our family's history. She decided to raise my mother. In her mind, adoption was out of the question. Now, I don't know about you, but when I put myself in her shoes, in my early 20s, late teens, with a traditional religious education, I don't know, I would maybe want to get out and get married and have a semblant of freedom, start my own household, have my own kids. But that's not what she did. It wasn't the case for my late aunt, who sacrificed her years, her youth, her future, to play the role of a mother that she barely had, for the sake of my mother's well-being. My mother turned out to be a super bright and talented young woman with so much love and caregiving in her heart that she passed on to me, her daughter, who has witnessed and learned about motherhood in its most courageous forms. My mother now is the director of a community development center in the one of the rural areas of Morocco, and she helps through entrepreneurship and through social entrepreneurship empower women who are illiterate in the area. So this is just to say that love and caring actually in the most intimate spaces have huge impacts that we often underestimate and that shape an entire nation's history, because this was not just my story, this was the story of millions and millions and millions of families. So today we're in 2017, and a lot of the courage of women is lived within closed doors, just like the stories of some of the women of my family. And while these stories shape today's society, they just don't get the admiration that they deserve. And I'm not talking about my late aunt and my late grandmother only. I'm talking about all the women who were not the daughters of notables of the urban elite. All the women whose patience and strength was only acknowledged and witnessed by people who shared the same struggle and who could only empower each other through that struggle. In my two short and maybe simplistic stories, the common denominator of women's struggle was that they wanted to bring education to the children that they were raising. And that inspired me to go through my studies and to pick education as a field of expertise. And the impact that this is going to have on my country, I don't know what it is right now, but I know that it comes from a place of courage, of sacrifice, that was passed on through different generations. And this is something that I have learned by being actually here in the United States to acknowledge a lot more than our culture allows to acknowledge. So that's all I wanted to share with you. I'm happy to talk more about more official versions of Moroccan history, but that's mine. Thank you.
So we're going to have a mostly Moroccan-inspired fashion show. Our models walking are going to be Iman and Huda. You'll see different dresses for different occasions, because as Moroccans like to do it, you can never wear the same thing twice, and it can never look the same. So we hope that you guys enjoy it and get a quick taste of what North Africa is like, with a couple of pieces are inspired by Middle Eastern traditions. So yeah, stay tuned. What we like to call gandora. This is usually for in-the-home, small occasions, family gatherings. She has a quick belt around her waist because the dress itself is very flowy. Women in Morocco, although are hosting their dinners, never actually get to enjoy them. So because they're constantly moving around, you need something to cinch it in. This is Iman. Iman is also wearing a gandora. This is most likely for more small traditions. If you're invited somewhere for a quick family gathering or a dinner and you just want something nice, flowy, and breathable, this is what you would wear. So both those styles are actually called gandoras, but as you can see, they're carried out in different ways depending on, I guess, what your role is at the occasion and how you're feeling. I personally like the more flowy one because, I mean, food babies never really show in that. huggers. These are much more casual, as you can tell. They can either come with the pants that accompany the top, or you can just rock them with a pair of jeans and some boots and head out the day. I'm wearing one right now. So these are much more casual if you're just heading out to dinner and you're going out and you just need something to throw on. These are much more casual. So with these sets, they usually come as a set with a top and a bottom. Most people nowadays like to totally disregard the bottom. Throw on a pair of jeans or a pair of black or blue, pair it up with some boots, flats, heels, and call it a day. It's one of those items that you can either dress up or dress down depending on how you're feeling or what your occasion is. Now, this is something we like to call farasha or butterfly, and it's because when she puts her hands up, she kind of looks like a little butterfly. This is one of those pieces that is inspired by Middle Eastern clothing, but also has a hint of Moroccan usually. The Moroccan inspiration comes from all these pieces being handmade, from the details that are sewed on to the measurements that are being taken. Usually women actually will have little shops, either shops that their own or just in their living rooms, and that's where they make the pieces. And all these are actually handmade by women who sat there and sewed on each piece. Now, this right here is a thun. This is something that would be worn to an extremely extravagant occasion or a wedding. If you're invited, you'd usually wear something traditional, and that's what it would be. It's very long, it's flowy. There's a belt around the waist to kind of cinch it all in and give you that hourglass figure. And then, as you can see, part of it goes up and gets tucked into the belt, and that's because there's usually designs on the underneath. So you can either wear it fully out, or you can just take one half of it, tuck it in, and you can see the designs. Now, last but not least, this is the woman who put all of this together. This is Nuzha. She's a member of AAAW. Will soon be opening up her own shop where she broadcasts all of these and more, including more interior design. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much for that. So our last group of people was actually put together by Marie Coulange. She's a Haitian community outreach organizer. And so the first person that's going to be speaking and representing them is Eunice. She's a second-generation Haitian immigrant. She's also the founder of Naturally, which is an eco-friendly organic skincare company. She is a believer of the advantage that to whom much is given, much is required. Eunice is continually giving back to the children and the youth of her church. She hosts Story Hour on the radio, which is Warm 104.1. It's a Christian radio station based in the Boston metro area and actually also broadcasts globally online. So please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes. We're just going to do a quick exercise just to get the blood circulating a little bit. So I'm going to ask that we're going to do I'm going to ask everyone to stand up, and you're going to face the robot. So we're going to do like this row is going to be these two rows are going to be a team. These two rows are going to be a team. These two rows you're going to face each other, and then these two rows you're going to turn around and face the people behind you. There you go. So women in your life, all of them. And then you're going to think of one word to describe them collectively, and then you're going to share it with your group. So you're going to share it with your group. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to repeat it. You're going to imagine a number of women in your life, right? So it could be your mom, your best friend, your sister, a colleague. You're going to think about them, and then you're going to think of one word to describe them as one, collectively. And then you're going to share that with your group. Any questions?
Do we share it all at the same time?
No, not at the same time. Think of your word, and everyone takes the time to share with your group. All right, we have 1 minute. Does anyone want to share some of the words that were in their group, or 1 or 2 words? Anyone want to share? Strong. Kind. Creative. I heard different. Loud. Okay. So I want you to hold on to these words, okay? All right, hold on to it until the end of my little presentation here. So I recently heard a quote, and the quote said that there are 3 deaths. The first death is when the body ceases to function. And the second death is when the body is placed in its permanent grave. And then the third death is sometime in the future when your name is spoken for the very last time. Oral history, sharing our family stories, fables, traditions, these are ways that we can remember the people that we love, the people that they loved, in ourselves and in our posterity. So today I wanted to take a few moments to share the story of one woman. And I share her story because I think in a lot of ways she encompasses what many women represent: industrious, sexualized, defiant. So yes, beyond the majestic Purple Mountains in the Caribbean, there is a rich tapestry of defiant women. And whenever I think of defiance and Caribbean, I always have to think about the unlikely yet very successful slave revolt. So let's go back there. We're gonna go to Hispaniola. Now, Hispaniola is the little island in the Caribbean that Christopher Columbus discovered. And when he landed there, he found the Kiscayan people. They were the original inhabitants of that island. But then they were killed off. And eventually, Africans, especially from West Africa, like Ghana, they became, instead of being people, they were merchandise, and they were transported to Hispaniola, and they started coming. And after several hundred years, the slaves decided, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore. And they revolted, and they won. They actually won their independence, and it still amazes me what they were able to do with little technology and lack of education. So the slaves revolted, and they were led by a man named Jean-Jacques Dessalines. But after the revolution, there was a little bit of division, and ultimately Dessalines was assassinated.
His head was shut off. And his body was taken. It was dragged throughout town, all over the streets, and then his body was left on the road. And this is when our heroine, she walks in. Her name is Dede Basile. But when this story is told in oral tradition from a parent to a child or a teacher to their pupil, she's called Défilé, the mad woman, the crazy woman. This crazy woman, she took the body of Dessalines and she cleaned it, she anointed it, and she gave him a proper burial. I've always wondered, why is it that when this story is told, this woman is referred to as crazy? And it turns out, many believe that her mental illness came on for maybe one of two reasons. One is possibly because she was raped by her master when she was 18 years old. The other could have been because of the number of her family members who had died on the battlefield. Colonialism was and is a very traumatic event. And I got to thinking, well, maybe Défilé was misunderstood. Maybe she was just suffering from post-traumatic stress and was, expressing herself in the best way she knew how to. Regardless, in her crazy state, she showed compassion. For me, Défilé, she is a survivor. She is a representation of all women globally who suffer silently after being sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, mentally assaulted. She is a representation of all women who, because of reasons beyond their control, that women who are hindered because of reasons beyond their own control. She is a representation of women whose past have given them nightmares, yet they're able to push forward. So for me, Dessalines, she is a survivor. And there are so many movements that are happening currently, right now, living and breathing beyond the borders of the United States. So in addition to sharing our stories, we have to remember those stories. We have to remember and keep sharing the stories of people beyond ourselves. Because ignoring any aspects of womanhood, even those that seem beyond our individual realm, will lead us to further subjugation. So, the moral is, let us share our stories so that we can learn from one another and grow in support of each other. And so that one day, sometime in the future, someone will say your name, but it won't be for the very last time. Do you all remember the words that you came up with during our exercise? Okay, we're gonna say them together enthusiastically on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Pray. Thank you.
So up next, we're going to have a spoken word from Darlene Coulange. Darlene is a poet, a singer, and songwriter. She was born in Cambridge, but actually raised in Port-au-Prince in Haiti. She is a 24-year-old Penn State alumni with a bachelor's in science in human development and family studies. She's currently pursuing a career in Berklee College of Music. She performs at weddings, banquets, churches, and multiple community events. Music is her passion, and she aims to share her voice and her spoken to uplift and inspire the world. She is obviously a beautiful woman filled with beautiful many talents, so please put your hands together for her.
Good evening. Wait, I need some more energy. Good evening. Okay, I like that better. It is such a privilege to be here. Thank you for Marie Rodrigue for inviting me. Thank you for the Malden Public Library for hosting us. Thank you for the men that are here. That's commendable, and that speaks volumes, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And thank you for all the women for just being women. Give yourself a round, yeah. Awesome. So today I have a spoken word, a poem for every single woman, despite of your race, your ethnicity. I want to speak to you guys on a deeper soul, spiritual level. Is that all right? I hope so. All right. This is a man's world, but it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl. This is a man's world, but it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl. Out of many Adams, God made Adam. And out of his hollow ribcage, God created women. Queen to queen, allow me to remind you that you weren't just made, you were created. And every intricate design was skillfully and purposefully refined to bring forth a creation so divine. Woman. When God created you, he used the sky as his blueprint, and since then the sky remained blue because of you. When God created you, he made a masterpiece, and within you he left his master's piece. The stars stood perfectly aligned, and the planets stood in line to be used as jewels to adorn you. Jealousy filtered throughout the galaxy as God put Saturn's rings on your fingers. Woman, you shined so bright that the sun became jealous. You glowed so intensely that the moon was filled with envy, and even the stars gossiped about you. Woman, when God created you, he breathed life into you. Instead, you took his breath away, and he died for you. Drop dead gorgeous queen, you are worth dying for. You support others when you know you need it the most, and you serve as a backbone even when you're broken. Woman, you are a bright spirited firefly in the darkness. You're so broken, woman. You are a bright spirited firefly in the darkness. You love so deeply and unconditionally that sometimes it hurts. You sacrifice so much of yourself that you become hollow. Woman, you are incredible. You are amazing. You are astonishing. You are majestic. You are beautiful. You're equipped with qualities that men cannot fathom, like strength and enough to birth a new generation. Womb stretching, pain intensifying, lungs pumping life into bodies and souls, ribs expanding, housing, creating daughters and sons who mimic the qualities of Ruth, Esther, David, and Solomon. You are a queen, and your worth is not found in the eyes of men, but you are far more worth than what society constructs you to be, expects you to be. Your worth is beyond your hips and thighs. You must realize that your place is not only in the home, your place is everywhere that the gospel can be spoken. Woman, you must realize that your place is not only in the home, it's everywhere that the gospel can be spoken through words and gestures. So speak, woman. Speak life into your family. Speak life into your friends. Speak life into those who need it the most. Speak. You're not meant to be silent. Speak, and God will allow his glory to shine through you before they even see your gender. Speak, woman. Like the aroma of soul food dinner on a Sunday. Speak, and let everything you touch turn into gold. You are a diamond in a crystal glass, created under pressure and refined by grace, so that any man who seeks your heart shall go through God to find it. Speak. Meanwhile, fix your crown and allow the Son of God to reflect His light on your crown and enlighten you in a world that tells you that you're not good enough. You are always good enough. You are always good enough. You are always good enough. You are intelligent. You are beautiful. You are powerful. You are capable. God's most astonishing creation. So the next time you look in the mirror and fail to see the standards of man, just know that God has you standing on a pedestal high enough to reach the heavens, because you were created in the image of a king. So embrace your majesty and act like royalty. Thank you.
So up next is Bryce. Bryce is a newcomer to the United States from the Cameroon. He's been singing and playing guitar since he was a little boy in church. He sings the blues, R&B, and soul, and he's going to play a little snippet for us today. So please give him your full attention. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'm going to play a song. It's Douala language. And I need you to sing with me. Sorry for my English, it's my first time. Yeah. This song is Aleyamba. Aleyamba means in English, Aleyamba. Okay. The next song is in English. The name is Mr. Jera. Mr. Jera is the song from Nigeria. Nigeria. I'm in chains, you're in chains too. I'm a uniforms, you're a beautiful too. I'm a prisoner, you're a prisoner too, Mr. Jailer. You don't care about my point of view. If I die, I know that will work for you. So you treat me like a modern slave, Mr. Jailer. I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let hear it without sing beautiful because the stone, Mr. Jailer, Mr. Jailer man. If you're walking in the marketplace, don't just stone. If you never will want my end, what I'm for us. Life is not about your policy all the time. Say you better rearrange in your philosophy or be good to my fellow material. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let hear your weak without singing beautiful to be cast the stone, Mr. Jailer, Mr. Gentleman. I heard my baby say, I wanna be a president. I want your money for my continent. What you don't know, what you could know, what you can't know. Jailer, Jailer, oh, be good, oh. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good. Oh, be good, oh, be good, oh, be good, oh. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good. À vous, somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good, oh. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good. Oh, be good, oh, be good, oh. I don't hear anything. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh. 1, 2, 3. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good, oh. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good, oh. Somebody be good, oh, be good, oh, be good. Oh, be good, oh, be good, oh, be good, oh. Jailer, Jailer, Mr. Jailer, yeah, yeah. Longelete e pula mutalo lolina tuponu. Na leli tolo na osimo na wasa moninge. Na ninye wala usono lolo woki ya yimoy nai. Na nyeli bolo na kasimo na wasa moninge. Paraniti ukananite niyo. Paraniti niyo. Paraniti
ni pula utolo lolinga ya pone na yale bolo na dasimo na masamu nyingeni na ninye wala usunu lolo yoko ya yawe kayeni na wasemolo na kwasemo na ni wala tukana wo paraliti na yawe paraliti ukalani hatini na ye paraliti ukalani hatini
Asian, Haïtiens, ils sont là? Ok, j'ai un tout petit truc pour vous. I have a little bit something with you, to you, sorry.
Thank you.
So last but not least, we're gonna have Irlene Dorval. Irlene Dorval was born in Haiti. She is married, has 3 handsome little boys. Since she was a child, she's always had a passion for music, and she is actually becoming a gospel singer with 2 albums coming out, one in Haitian Creole and the other one in English. Apart from all of this, she has an interest in fashion design and cosmetology. She loves reading and spending time with her loved ones, so please give her a round of applause.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys this afternoon. Before I started, always do what you love. If I'm standing here right now, it's because I love singing. Since I was a little one, it's not the album coming out, they're already out. It's 2 albums, one in English and one in Creole. To make the story short, I only sing Christian songs. So for all the things that God done for me, this is how I can pay him back with my voice and sing to praise his name. I'll be singing All to Jesus I Surrender. For some of you, if you know that song, you can sing along with me. I will do an a cappella, and the second one will be the Haitian beat. As long as you hear compa, that means Haitian are there. So that will be the second one. And all to Jesus I surrender. All to him I freely give. And I will ever love and cherish him. In his presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all to Jesus. I surrender. Humbly at his feet I bow. Worldly pleasures all forsaken. Take me, Jesus, take me now. I surrender all to you. I surrender all to you. All to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender. Yes, I surrender. I surrender all to you. The second song is, they don't have the thing to play the playback, so it's already have my voice on it. I don't like to sing with my voice included, but it's okay. So it's Haitian beat, compa. Allah yon sauveur, especial mwen genyen. Allah yon bon sauveur pou mwen. Li kache nan mwen, an detan gwo wash la, kote la li a koule. Li kache nan mwen, an detan gwo wash la, li kouvri man ba l'ombraj li. Kounye m konen, la li mwen asire, m'pape sa ka prive m demen. M'pape sa ka prive m demen. Li toujou komble mwen ak benediksyon, li remplim ak grâce li béni. Allah yon rédempteur, moi pas qu'oublier, et dem chanter yon chant pour lui. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couru mon ballon brèche li. Connaît la vie moi assurée, Mbappé sa cabrive demain, Mbappé sa cabrive demain. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couvri moi là. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couvri moi là. Allah yon sauveur et spécial à moi gagné, spécial à moi gagné. Li prend tout, fardeau mieux pour moi. Li mette bien haut pour pied, ma fait bitaille. Et li m'a mis en feu sans pareil. Li caché la moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couru mon ballon joli. Communier, connaît, la vie moi assurée, Mbappé sa cabrive demain, Mbappé sa cabrive demain. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couru mon ballon rajli. Connaît, la vie moi assurée, Mbappé sa cabrive demain, Mbappé sa cabrive demain. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couvri moi là. When you hear that beat, that mentation is there. Li caché dans moi, it's called compas. En dedans gros roche là, li couvri moi là. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couvri moi là. Li caché dans moi, en dedans gros roche là, li couvri moi là. Wash qui pique au passement, l'Éternel caché moi en bas moi wash là. Li ennemi vient pour moi en bas moi wash là. L'Éternel caché moi en bas moi wash là. En bas moi wash là. Wash qui pique au passement, l'Éternel caché moi en bas moi wash là. People dancing with a partner together. It's a really nice beat. All the Haitian war with compa. It's not difficult to dance. Wash qui pique pour passer le temps. L'Éternel caché moi en bas moi wash là. En bas moi wash là. Wash qui pique pour passer le temps. L'Éternel caché moi en bas moi wash là. Dis ennemi bien pour moi en bas moi wash là. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So actually, before I make any more announcements, I'd like you all to direct your attention to Dora, and she's the director of the library. If you just want to come up here, she just has a couple of announcements for you guys.
The
first one is just thank you all for coming to the Malden Public Library and being here with us. This was an amazing, amazing afternoon. So thank you to everyone here. But really why I'm here is to invite you to an incredibly special event we're having here at the library to celebrate an incredibly strong woman. So I want you all to be invited. Next Saturday, March 18th, at 11 o'clock to 11:30, we are inviting families to a special story time. The story time is going to be read by Dr. Carla Hayden, who is the 14th Librarian of Congress. Yay! Now, let me explain what that means to librarians. The Library of Congress is the National Library of the United States. She is in charge of that entire library, all the federal funding that comes to libraries, as well as things like caring and preserving for the Declaration of Independence. So she is a strong woman. She's the very first woman ever to hold this position. She's the first African American ever to be the Librarian of Congress. And she's just really, really amazing. So bring your children. This is a story time read by Dr. Hayden and Senator Edward Markey. This will be 11:30 to 11:30, and we're recommending it for children preschool and up. So we hope to fill this room with the children of Malden and show Dr. Hayden the diversity and wonderfulness of our community. So please come, and thank you so much.
Thank you. So before I also make any other announcements, we have food and refreshments on the side for you guys to, after all of this is wrapped up, to just network and talk and eat some goodies. During that, Fabian is actually a musician from Columbia who's studied there and here. He plays and teaches. He's won 14 prizes at a plethora of prestigious Colombian music festivals, and he's going to be entertaining us during that. So once again, I'd like to thank all of you guys for joining us today and coming. And just as I opened with a quote, I'd like to end with a quote. I chose this quote because it reminded me of my mom. And as we all know, a lot of you here are moms, and being a mom is such a hard and underrated job that, quite frankly, a lot of people don't understand, because a lot of people can't be moms, aka like men. So whether you're a mom or not, I just want you to keep this in the back of your mind. I want you to keep, and I want you to remember that at the end of the day, don't forget that you are a person. Don't forget that you are a mother. Don't forget that you are a wife. And don't forget that you are a daughter. So with all of this, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank all of the volunteers that have helped to make this event possible. I'd like to thank all of the businesses that have sponsored us. I'd like to think of all the people that have taken the time out of their Saturday after I'm sure was a busy week to come and support us and give us their gratitude. We appreciate you guys so much. Thank you, and hopefully we'll see you all at the next event and the next year for another International Women's Day event. Thank you guys.